The wedding was perfect, at least. That's what I thought. My brother, Daniel, looked ecstatic standing beside his new wife, Sophia. The whole town had gathered to celebrate, and as far as I could tell, everything went smoothly. Toasts were made, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. It wasn't until the next evening, at our family gathering, that the nightmare began. We were all sitting in my parents' cozy living room, reminiscing about funny wedding moments when Daniel suddenly stood up, his face dark with fury. His voice shook as he pointed straight at me. Jessica stole our honeymoon money. $110,000 gone. The room went dead silent. My heart pounded. Me? Stealing from my own brother? The accusation hit me like a train. Before I could even get a word out, he kept going, his voice rising with every sentence. I can't believe you do this to me, Jess. You ruined everything. Do you know how devastated Sophia is? She's been crying all day. I looked over at Sophia, who sat frozen, her hands covering her mouth in shock. My parents' reactions were even worse. Jessica, how could you? My father demanded, shaking his head in utter disappointment. You stole from your own brother? You're no daughter of mine, my mother added, her voice laced with betrayal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family, my parents had turned against me instantly, without even giving me a chance to defend myself. I didn't take anything, I finally managed to say, my voice firm despite the lump in my throat. I was at the front desk all night. I don't even know where the money was kept. For a brief second, Sophia hesitated. She glanced at me, uncertainty flashing in her eyes. But Daniel wasn't about to let her doubt him. Stop defending her, Sophia. She's lying, he snapped, his anger now venomous. And just like that, my fate was sealed. My own parents told me to leave. You're not welcome here anymore, my father said coldly. I was stunned. The people who had raised me, who were supposed to love and protect me, had just disowned me over a lie. Daniel had destroyed me in a matter of minutes, and I didn't even know why. As I walked out of my childhood home into the cold night air, I had no idea what had just happened, or why my own brother had turned me into the villain. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let him win. I barely remembered driving home that night. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed, constantly texts from my parents. Messages in the family group chat, all of them filled with disappointment, anger, and accusations. You've let everyone down. I can't believe you would do this to your own brother. You're no longer part of this family. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat, my stomach twisting. They had already made up their minds. It didn't matter that I was innocent. Daniel had spoken, and in their eyes, that was enough. But as I sat alone in my dark apartment, staring blankly at the ceiling, pieces of the puzzle started clicking into place. This wasn't about the money. This was about Grandfather Carter. A few months ago, my grandfather had made something very clear when he passed. Most of his inheritance would go to me. He had always believed that I was responsible and would use the money wisely, unlike Daniel, who had a reputation for reckless spending. Daniel had been furious when he found out. He had tried to change Grandfather's mind, arguing that as the eldest son, he deserved everything. But Grandfather didn't budge. And now, just weeks later, Daniel had come up with the perfect plan to ruin my reputation. By painting me as a liar and a thief, he could turn my entire family against me before Grandfather even had a chance to finalize anything. I clenched my fists. He wanted me out of the picture, and he had almost succeeded. But there was one thing he didn't know. I had a secret of my own one that could shatter his perfect little world. For months, I had kept quiet. I hadn't planned on saying anything, not even to Sophia. But if Daniel wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier, because I knew something that would tear his entire life apart. He had been cheating on Sophia for months. I had caught him by accident one evening in a town just a few miles away. I had been meeting a friend at a quiet cafe when I saw him holding hands, laughing, kissing someone who was definitely not his fiancée. At the time, I had let it go. It wasn't my business, and I figured it would catch up to him eventually. But now, he had left me no choice. I wasn't just going to clear my name, I was going to destroy him. I spent the next few days keeping a low profile, ignoring the endless stream of messages from my parents and the rest of my so-called family. The only person I was remotely curious about was Sophia. Did she really believe I stole the money, or was she just too shocked to question Daniel's story? Either way, it didn't matter. Soon, she would know exactly who she had married. But first, I needed proof. I knew Daniel well enough to predict his routine. He always thought he was smarter than everyone else. But the truth was, he was predictable. Arrogance makes people sloppy. Every Thursday night, like clockwork, he would go out for business meetings. Of course, I knew better. I had already caught him once at that cafe, wrapped up in some other woman's arms. The only thing I had been missing back then was evidence. Not this time. So, on Thursday evening, I waited. At exactly 6:45 p.m., I watched from my parked car as Daniel left his house, dressed a little too well for a business meeting. I followed him at a safe distance, my heart hammering in anticipation. 15 minutes later, he pulled into a familiar parking lot, the same cafe where I had seen him before. And just like before, his mistress was already waiting for him. They embraced the second he stepped out of his car. Not a casual hug, not a friendly greeting, a kiss. A long, deep kiss that left no doubt about what was going on. I hit record. For the next 7 minutes, I documented everything. The hand holding, the whispering, the way he leaned in, fingers tracing along her arm. If someone had walked in without knowing, they would have assumed they were watching a couple madly in love. I almost felt bad for Sophia. Almost. By the time they finally left the cafe, I had more than enough footage. But I wasn't done yet. As Daniel and his mistress stepped outside, saying their goodbyes, he pulled her in for one last kiss. A long, lingering embrace under the dim streetlights. Perfect. I had everything I needed. Now, it was time for the real fun. Setting the stage the next morning, I sent a message in the family group chat. Jessica, I want to meet for dinner and clear the air. I owe everyone an explanation, especially you, Sophia. It didn't take long for the responses to flood in. Mom, you'd better have a damn good reason for what you did. Daniel, finally ready to admit it. Sophia, I'll be there. Her response was short, but I could read between the lines. She wanted answers. Good, because she was about to get them. The dinner that night, I walked into my parents' house as if I wasn't about to set off an atomic bomb in the middle of their dinner table. The atmosphere was thick with tension. My mother barely looked at me. My father wouldn't meet my gaze. And Daniel sat at the head of the table like a king, smirking. Sophia sat beside him, quiet but watching. I took my seat, took a deep breath, and began. First of all, I want to say I'm sorry. That got their attention. My mother folded her arms. You should be. Yeah, Jessica, Daniel said, leaning back in his chair, smug as ever. I mean, stealing from your own family? How low can you get? I ignored him. I wasn't here to fight. I've been thinking about everything that happened, I continued, and I realized there's something I should have said sooner. Something I've been holding back. Daniel leaned forward slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. He thought I was about to confess. He had no idea. Slowly, I pulled out my laptop, placed it on the table, and opened a video file. What you're about to see isn't easy to watch, I said, but it's important. I hit play. The room fell silent. On the screen, Daniel appeared, walking into the cafe. Then the woman, the kiss, the intimate touches, the lingering looks. Sophia went rigid. My parents stared, wide-eyed, as their golden boy was exposed. Then, the final scene, the last kiss under the streetlight. The video ended. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then, who the hell is that? Sophia's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. Daniel's face went pale. It's not what it looks like, he stammered. Really? I leaned back, arms crossed, because it looks pretty damn clear to me. Sophia turned to him, her expression shifting from shock to rage. You've been cheating on me? She demanded. This whole time? Daniel panicked. Sophia, baby, please. She shot up from her chair. Don't baby me. My mother, still processing what she had seen, turned on me instead. How could you do this, Jessica? To your own brother? I let out a sharp laugh. Me? You're really going to defend him after seeing that? My father sighed, rubbing his temples. This is a mess. No kidding, I said, standing up. You wanted a villain? Fine, but at least pick the right one. Sophia didn't say another word. She simply grabbed her purse, her ring, and without looking back, walked out the door. Daniel scrambled after her. Sophia, wait! The front door slammed shut, and just like that, his perfect life crumbled. I turned to my parents, but I already knew what they were going to say. You've done enough, Jessica. Of course, because Daniel could burn the whole world down. and they would still shield him from the flames. I shook my head. You know what? I said, grabbing my laptop. I'm done. Then, without another word, I walked out too. I didn't hear from anyone for days. Not my parents, not Daniel, not even Sophia. It was like the whole family had gone into hiding, licking their wounds and pretending none of it had ever happened. Fine by me. I wasn't expecting an apology, not from my parents, and certainly not from Daniel. But I did wonder about Sophia. Where had she gone? Had she finally left him for good? Or was she being sucked back into his endless web of manipulation? I got my answer 2 days later. My phone buzzed, and to my surprise, it was Sophia. Sophia, hey, can we talk? I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Me? Sure. 30 minutes later, I met her at a quiet coffee shop in town. The irony wasn't lost on me, the same kind of place where Daniel had been sneaking around behind her back. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, staring blankly into her cup. She looked exhausted. I slid into the seat across from her. Didn't expect to hear from you. She let out a dry laugh. Yeah, well, turns out getting publicly humiliated at a family dinner kind of ruins your week. I raised an eyebrow. Are you mad at me? She shook her head, sighing. No, just mad at myself. She looked up, her eyes tired but clear. I should have known. I said nothing, just let her talk. There were signs, she admitted. Little things that didn't add up. Times he'd disappear. Excuses that felt flimsy. But I told myself I was being paranoid. I didn't want to believe it. I finally spoke. So, what now? She exhaled sharply. I'm done. I moved out yesterday. Good, I said simply. She gave a small smile, but it was bitter. He's been blowing up my phone, begging me to come back, promising it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, I said. It was a habit. She nodded. Yeah, and I'm not falling for it. A beat of silence passed between us before she finally asked, Why did you do it, Jessica? Why go through all that trouble just to expose him? I thought about it. At first, I had told myself it was about revenge, about getting back at him for destroying my reputation, for turning my parents against me. And sure, that was part of it. But sitting across from Sophia now, seeing the way the weight had started to lift off her shoulders, I realized something. Because someone had to, I said. And because if I hadn't, he would have kept getting away with it. She nodded, as if she already knew that answer. Before we parted ways, she looked at me seriously. Thank you, Jessica. I mean it. You don't owe me anything, I said. Just don't let him drag you back in. She smiled. Never. Family, loyalty, or lack thereof, that small moment of peace didn't last long. The very next day, my phone buzzed again this time. It was Mom. Mom, we need to talk. I almost laughed. Oh, now she wanted to talk? For a second, I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. Me? About what? Her response came fast. Mom, your behavior at dinner. You humiliated your brother in front of everyone. I felt my blood boil. Me. I showed the truth. If the truth humiliates him, that's on him, not me. Mom, family is supposed to support each other, Jessica. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Me? Oh, you mean like the way you supported me when Daniel accused me of stealing? Mom, that was different. Me? How? Mom, because Daniel is your brother. We can't just turn our backs on him. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around my phone. Me? Funny? You had no problem turning your back on me. Silence. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't reply. Then, Mom, we just want things to go back to the way they were. That was it. That was the moment I realized there was no fixing this. Because for them, family didn't mean fairness. It didn't mean right or wrong. It meant Daniel and whatever made him happy. I didn't reply, and I didn't plan to. Daniel's last attempt, a week passed. I moved on. I started spending time with people who actually cared about me, instead of wasting my energy on people who didn't. Then, out of nowhere, Daniel called. I almost didn't pick up, but a part of me was curious. I answered. Jessica, he started, his voice carefully controlled. We need to talk, I snorted. About what? How I ruined your life. A pause. Look, I was mad, okay? I said things I shouldn't have. I rolled my eyes. You accused me of stealing $110,000, turned the whole family against me, and now that your life is falling apart, you want to act like this was just a misunderstanding? I was upset, he snapped, and now I've lost everything. Sophia's gone. My business is struggling. Even Mom and Dad are pissed at me. Not enough to actually hold you accountable, I muttered. He sighed. Look, I want to fix this. I raised an eyebrow. Fix what? Exactly. The family. We need to make things right. I let out a sharp laugh. And by make things right, you mean I just pretend none of this ever happened? Jessica, come on. No, Daniel. You don't get to do this. You don't get to burn my life to the ground and then ask me to help you rebuild yours. Silence. Then his voice turned sharp. So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on me? No, I said. You turned your back on me first. I'm just making sure I never give you another chance to do it again. I hung up. And just like that, Daniel was finally out of my life. I thought that was the end of it. After I hung up on Daniel, I figured he'd slink away, licking his wounds, and eventually accept that he had lost. His business was crumbling, his fiancée had left him, and the family that had once blindly defended him was finally starting to see him for what he really was. I should have known better, because Daniel wasn't the type to accept defeat, and his next move was as bold as it was stupid. Daniel's last, desperate gambit. A few days after our last conversation, I woke up to an explosion of messages from mutual friends, extended family, and even a few people in town I barely spoke to. The reason? Daniel had started spreading a new story. According to him, I had set him up. That video? Fake. The entire thing? A calculated revenge plot to ruin his life. He told anyone who would listen that I had been following him for weeks, trying to catch him slipping, that I had hired someone to seduce him so I could fabricate evidence, that I was just bitter over the inheritance and had gone to extreme lengths to destroy him. It was so absurd I actually laughed when I first read the messages, but the more I scrolled, the more I realized some people believed him. That was the worst part, no matter how much proof I had, no matter how many lies I had already exposed. Some people would always see me as the villain. I could have ignored it. I could have let him dig his own grave, let him burn out on his own. But after everything he had done, I wasn't going to let him have the last word. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I went public. The truth goes viral. I took everything I had, the video, the screenshots, the texts, even the messages from Sophia confirming what had happened, and I put it all out there. I didn't just send it to family. I posted it online. A detailed, well-documented breakdown of the truth. No dramatics, no embellishments, just cold, hard facts. I didn't expect it to blow up the way it did, but within hours, it spread. People started sharing, commenting, calling out Daniel's lies. Even people who had once defended him started backtracking, realizing they had been played. Then, the final nail in the coffin, Sophia stepped in. She posted her own message, publicly confirming everything. Jessica didn't ruin my relationship. Daniel did that all by himself. The only reason he's trying to shift blame now is because he got caught. And I, for one, am glad he did. That was it. That was the moment Daniel lost everything. The aftermath, Daniel went silent. No more messages, no more damage control, just complete, deafening silence. The next time I heard about him, his restaurant was on the verge of shutting down. Apparently, customers had started avoiding the place, not outright boycotting, but choosing to spend their money elsewhere. No one wanted to support a liar. And my parents? They finally admitted they had been wrong. Not with some grand, heartfelt apology. Not with tears or dramatic speeches. Just a quiet phone call from my father, late one night. We made a mistake. That was all he said. And for once, I didn't feel the need to argue. I just said, yeah, you did. I didn't forgive them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I was finally done waiting for their approval. Where things stand now, Daniel left town a few weeks later. Rumor had it he moved to another state, trying to start fresh somewhere people hadn't heard his name. But you can't outrun your own mistakes. As for me, I moved on. I rebuilt my life, surrounded myself with people who actually cared. I stopped wasting my energy, trying to please people who would never see my worth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Daniel had tried to destroy me, but in the end, he was the only one who lost everything, and I never had to lift a finger. He did it all to himself. Story 2. My name is AmITheA Hayes, and I'm 28 years old. I will never forget the day I realized that my family, my own flesh and blood, had been taking advantage of me for years. They thought I was blind to their schemes, but they had no idea I had already secured my future. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the daughter who sacrificed everything for the family business, while my younger sister, Emily, now 25, lived as if she were an Instagram celebrity. I was working 12-hour days, making sure our family empire stayed afloat. Our father, Richard Hayes, had built a boutique hotel chain from the ground up. and I had been learning the ropes since I was 16. "Olivia, you need to understand this business requires sacrifice," my father would say whenever I canceled plans with friends to meet last-minute deadlines. Meanwhile, Emily burned through the company's money like it was Monopoly cash. "Your sister is young. Let her enjoy life. She'll mature eventually," my mother, Diane, would always say in her defense. But she never did. At 25, Emily still lived in our parents' house with no real job beyond posting selfies with designer bags and tagging luxury resorts. Then, 6 months ago, everything changed. I met Nathan, our new financial advisor. He was sharp, thorough, and most importantly, honest. It didn't take him long to notice some troubling inconsistencies in the company's financial records. One afternoon, he walked into my office and closed the door behind him. His expression was serious. "Olivia, I've been reviewing the accounts from the past 5 years," he began, placing a stack of documents on my desk. "Did you know your sister has spent over $2 million so of company funds?" I felt the air leave my lungs. "What?" He slid the paperwork toward me. Travel expenses, shopping sprees, lavish parties, everything meticulously labeled under marketing expenses. "She claims she's the brand's social media face," Nathan explained. That night, I confronted my father. His response chilled me to the bone. "I know, Olivia. I approved those expenses." I blinked. $2 million in personal spending? You're serious? My father took off his reading glasses and let out a slow sigh. "You contribute to the company in your way, and she contributes in hers." That conversation opened my eyes. I had spent years working myself to exhaustion, believing that one day I'd earn my father's approval. But the truth was, I never would. Nathan became my confidant. Over the next few months, we quietly documented every irregularity, every questionable transfer, every suspicious expense. The more we uncovered, the worse it got. Then Nathan found something else. "Your father is planning to transfer significant assets, including your house," he told me one evening. I froze. "My house? Technically, you bought it with your salary, but they're arguing that it was a corporate gift. They're drafting documents to transfer it to Emily." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The home I had built, the one place I had made for myself, could be taken away with a single signature. But I wasn't about to let that happen. Nathan and I had a plan. The moment of truth came on my 28th birthday. My family threw a lavish party at my parents' estate. Everyone was there: relatives, business partners, board members. During the toast, Emily stood up, her crystal champagne flute shimmering in the light. "I have a special announcement," she said, her smile beaming at the crowd. "My father has given me the most incredible gift, Olivia's house." The room went silent. My mother was grinning with pride. My father looked away. "Isn't it wonderful?" Emily continued. "Since Olivia is always at the office, she doesn't really need such a big house. I'll put it to better use." I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my mind razor sharp. "You're right, Emily. I am always at the office." I reached into my handbag and pulled out a folder. "And since we're making announcements, I have one of my own." The murmur of conversation died instantly. Emily still had no idea what was coming. "As CEO and majority shareholder of our boutique hotel company, I have a few updates." Emily's smile faltered. My father straightened in his chair. "First, effective immediately, all personal expenses will require board approval, not just the president's signature." Emily's face drained of color. "Second," I continued, my voice steady, "I have initiated a full audit of the company's financial records for the past 5 years. That includes all marketing expenditures related to social media." "Olivia, this isn't the time or place," my father interrupted, his voice tense. "Isn't it?" I shot back. "Didn't you just use my birthday party to announce that you were giving my house away?" From the other side of the room, Nathan stood up, distributing folders to the board members present. "Inside these documents," I announced, "you will find evidence of corporate fund misappropriation totaling over $2 million. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Personal expenses disguised as marketing costs. Luxury vacations labeled as business trips. Designer shopping sprees categorized as market research. Emily shot to her feet, her voice shaking. "This is ridiculous. Dad approved all of those expenses. I am the brand's image. I turned to the presentation screen and pressed a button. Emily's Instagram posts flashed onto the display. Let's take a look, I said. Parties in Ibiza marketing for family-friendly hotels. Designer handbags market research. Make it make sense, Emily. My mother bolted upright, her face red with fury. Olivia, how dare you humiliate your sister like this? I met her gaze unflinching. Humiliate her? The way you tried to humiliate me by stealing my house? My father slammed his hand against the table. This is a family matter. I ask all non-family members to leave. Nathan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. I'm afraid that's not possible, he said, standing beside me. Since this involves potential corporate fraud, the board members have the right and the obligation to be here. The next few minutes were pure chaos. Emily was crying, my mother was shouting about family loyalty, and my father was desperately trying to regain control. But the truth was out now, and I wasn't done yet. The chaos in the room was deafening. My mother was practically shaking with rage. My father was trying and failing to control the situation. And Emily? She had gone from smug to shell-shocked in a matter of minutes. But I wasn't done, not even close. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady, despite the storm unfolding around me. There's more. I reached into my folder and pulled out another set of documents. As CEO and majority shareholder, I've made some executive decisions. First, the transfer of my house to Emily has been blocked. In fact, I've filed a legal injunction preventing any corporate property transfers without full board approval. My father's face darkened, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You can't do this, he hissed. I tilted my head slightly, meeting his glare with cold certainty. Actually, I can. You structured the company this way for tax purposes years ago. You gave me majority control, thinking it was just a technicality. Well, Dad, turns out I was paying attention. Silence. I glanced around the room. Some of the board members looked uncomfortable, others intrigued. A few were already flipping through the documents Nathan had distributed. Good. Emily, who had been standing in stunned silence, suddenly snapped back to life. She stepped forward, her voice shrill. You're just jealous, she spat. You've always been jealous of me. I let out a quiet laugh, humorless, sharp. Jealous of what, exactly? The fact that you've never worked a single day in your life? That you blew through millions while I was pulling all-nighters to keep this company running? Emily's face twisted with rage. She turned to my father, desperate now. Dad, say something. But he said nothing. Instead, he sat there, shoulders slumped, staring at the pile of documents in front of him. It was over, and he knew it. My mother, however, wasn't ready to give up the fight. Olivia, she started, her voice suddenly softer, coaxing, as if we hadn't just spent the last 15 minutes tearing down years of corruption. Sweetheart, this is unnecessary. We're family. We can fix this privately. Oh, now you want privacy? I cut her off. Funny, considering you just tried to gift my house to Emily in front of an entire audience. I turned back to the board. Who seconds the motion? For a moment, hesitation. Then one hand went up, then another, and another, until it was clear. I had won. My father exhaled sharply, as if the reality of the situation had just fully sunk in. If you continue down this path, he said, voice low, you'll destroy this family. I held his gaze. No, Dad. You destroyed this family when you decided that responsibility meant nothing, that my sacrifices meant nothing, that Emily could do whatever she wanted and never face consequences. This isn't my fault. This is yours. Emily let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Fine, you win. You've always wanted to be the golden child anyway. That made me pause. Are you serious? I asked, voice quieter now. Emily, I never wanted to be the golden child. I wanted a family that valued me the way I valued them. But instead, I got this. She crossed her arms, looking away. Nathan cleared his throat, stepping forward. There's still one last matter to discuss. My father's jaw tightened. He knows what's coming. Nathan placed another thick stack of documents on the table. The personal accounts. My mother paled. Emily looked confused for a second, then realization dawned. My father barely whispered the words, "Please stop," but I wasn't stopping. Not now. Why? I asked. Because now the board finally sees what's been happening behind closed doors? Because your little financial shell game is coming to an end? Nathan continued, unfazed. Our audit revealed that for years, company funds have been funneled into personal accounts controlled by Richard and Diane Hayes. Money that was supposed to be reinvested into the business was instead being used for personal luxury, undocumented withdrawals, and unauthorized real estate purchases. I turned back to my parents, my voice level. Did you ever actually care about this company? Or was it just your personal piggy bank? My mother had tears in her eyes. Everything we did was for the family. I let out a slow, humorless laugh. No, Mom, you did it for yourselves. Because it was easier to spoil Emily than to teach her responsibility. Because it was easier to spend money that wasn't yours than to earn it the right way. Because it was easier to pretend there was no problem than to fix it. The weight of it all settled over the room like a thick fog. Nathan glanced at me. The board will need to vote on how to proceed. I nodded. I know. But first, Dad, Mom, Emily, if any of you have anything left to say, now would be the time. Silence. Emily wiped away a tear angrily, glaring at me like I was the villain in all of this. My father looked defeated. My mother just shook her head as if she still couldn't believe I had done this. I sighed. All right then. The meeting continued, but I already knew the outcome. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one making sacrifices for them. For the first time in my life, I was in control. The meeting ended in a way none of them had expected. My parents had been stripped of their financial control over the company, and Emily, she had officially lost access to the endless supply of money she'd always taken for granted. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. Nathan and I stayed behind after the board members left, reviewing the final paperwork. The estate was quiet now, aside from the occasional clinking of glasses being cleared away by the catering staff. You okay? Nathan asked, his voice softer now that the storm had passed. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. I don't know. I thought this would feel better. But all I can think about is how much of my life I wasted trying to earn their respect. Nathan nodded, sliding a document toward me. You didn't waste anything. You just finally saw the truth. I stared at the papers in front of me, signatures, financial statements, legal confirmations, proof that I had taken back control. And yet, a part of me still felt that small, lingering ache. They were still my family, no matter how selfish, no matter how reckless. A part of me had always hoped they would wake up one day and see me the way I had always seen them. Nathan seemed to read my thoughts. He placed a hand over mine, grounding me back in the present. They had their chance, Olivia. You gave them years. Now, it's your turn. One swallowed hard, forcing a small nod. Yeah. My turn. The aftermath. The next few weeks were brutal. The full audit revealed even more financial mismanagement than we had expected. It wasn't just Emily's reckless spending. My parents had been quietly funneling money into personal accounts for years. Real estate, offshore investments, even luxury cars they had never officially listed. When confronted, my father barely even fought back. It was like he had already resigned himself to the fact that he'd lost. My mother, on the other hand, tried to negotiate. Olivia, we can work something out. Maybe if we just move some assets around. No, my voice was firm, unwavering. There is no more moving things around. No more hiding, no more lying. The board has already voted. The money is being accounted for, and you're no longer in control. She gave me a look I had never seen before, something between betrayal and disbelief. You would really do this to your own parents? I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. Mom, you did this to yourselves. She didn't say another word after that. Emily's fall from grace, Emily, of course, took it the worst. At first, she denied everything. Acting like this was all some huge misunderstanding. Then, when she realized the money was actually gone, she shifted to outrage. What the hell am I supposed to do now? She snapped at me one afternoon, barging into my office. You ruined my life. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. No, Emily, you ruined your own life when you spent millions of company funds like it was monopoly money. She scoffed, pacing like a caged animal. Dad always said the money was for the family. No, Dad let you believe that because it was easier than telling you no. She shook her head, laughing bitterly. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Emily, I don't think I'm better than you. I think I actually had to work for everything I have, while you got handed everything and still managed to lose it all. For the first time, she didn't have a snappy comeback. Instead, she just stood there, shoulders tense, jaw clenched. There's an entry-level position open in marketing, I said finally, keeping my tone neutral. Starting salary, just like everyone else. You could learn the business the right way. Her expression twisted in anger. You expect me to work for you? No, I said simply. I expect you to work for yourself." She stormed out after that, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. A new beginning. The days stretched into weeks. Emily refused to speak to me for a while, and my parents kept their distance, adjusting to their new reality. But slowly, things started to change. Emily eventually took the job in marketing, not because she wanted to, but because, for the first time in her life, she didn't have a choice. At first, she was bitter, dragging her feet, making snide comments whenever she saw me in the office. But then, something strange happened. She started trying. I caught her staying late one night, poring over campaign analytics. Another time, she actually asked a senior marketing executive for feedback, instead of just assuming she knew everything. And slowly, begrudgingly, she started earning respect, not because of her name, but because of her work. One evening, I found my mother watching Emily from across the office. Something unreadable in her expression. She sighed, shaking her head. Maybe we were too soft on her. I didn't say anything. She was right. But some lessons have to be learned the hard way. And Emily, she was finally learning. Time has a way of reshaping things. The bitterness fades. The sharp edges of anger dull. And what's left is just the truth, the kind that lingers, that you can't ignore no matter how much you want to. A year after that night, things were different. The company was different. I was different. The company Thrive Sutton Hotels was finally running like an actual business, not a personal ATM for my family. With real financial oversight in place, profits stabilized. The reckless spending was gone, and we were expanding in ways that actually made sense. Nathan and I worked side by side. And for the first time, I had a leadership team that respected me not because of my last name, but because I had earned it. And my parents, they stayed quiet. My father retired officially, though it wasn't exactly by choice. The board made it clear that there was no longer a place for him in company leadership. He didn't fight it, he just stepped back. I think some part of him knew he had lost long before the final votes were cast. My mother adjusted in her own way. She still played the role of a society wife, attending charity galas and social events. But the difference was, she wasn't using company money to fund it anymore. It was strange she didn't reach out to me much after everything went down, but she didn't lash out either. It was like she didn't quite know what to do with me now, that she couldn't control me. And then there was Emily. Emily's transformation, I expected her to quit within a month. I figured she'd pout, throw a tantrum, and run to my mother, demanding they fix things for her. But she didn't. She stayed. At first, she treated the job like a joke, bare minimum effort, showing up late, rolling her eyes at meetings. But over time, she started changing, slowly. I caught her asking questions, real questions. I saw her watching marketing campaigns with genuine interest, instead of just assuming she already knew everything. Then one day she showed up early, on purpose. I didn't acknowledge it, but I noticed. A few months later, she pitched a campaign idea in a meeting. It wasn't bad. The execution was a little off, but the concept, solid. The marketing director nodded. "Not a bad idea, Emily. Work on the numbers and let's revisit next week." And for the first time, Emily didn't roll her eyes. She didn't act insulted. She just nodded and jotted something down in her notebook. I didn't say anything, but later that night, I found myself staring at my ceiling, realizing something I never thought I'd admit. I was proud of her. She was finally learning what it meant to earn something. A quiet understanding one evening. Months later, I was finishing up some reports in my office when there was a knock at my door. Emily. I glanced up, waiting for whatever dramatic complaint she was about to drop on me, but she just stood there hesitating. I wanted to say thanks, she muttered. That threw me. For what? She shifted awkwardly, crossing her arms. For not letting me get away with everything. For making me work for it. I blinked. That was probably the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from her. "You're welcome," I said finally. She nodded once, then turned and left. That was it. No dramatic moment, no teary reconciliation, just an understanding. And honestly, that was enough. Moving forward now, 2 years later, things are stable. Emily has worked her way up to a managerial position not because of nepotism, but because she actually earned it. She's still Emily. She still loves luxury, still thrives on attention, but she's different now. She understands what hard work means. My parents have accepted their new reality. My mother and I will never be close, and I've made peace with that. My father and I have a quiet, mutual respect now. He may not have wanted to step down, but he knows the company is better off in my hands. And me? I still live in my house, the one they tried to take from me. It's not just a house. It's a symbol of everything I fought for, everything I refused to let them take. Nathan and I got married last year. Turns out, he wasn't just my financial advisor, he was my partner in more ways than one. And now, for the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. Because sometimes, loving your family doesn't mean letting them take advantage of you. Sometimes, it means setting boundaries. Sometimes, it means letting them fall so they can finally learn how to stand. And sometimes, it means taking back everything they tried to steal, then building something even stronger.